It's January 2011, and the State Department gets the call. Hey, guys, you know what? Those people those students in Cairo, we've been teaching about democratic values and how to use the internet and all that kind of stuff. They're going to overthrow our key ally in this region. How did that go down?
So let me broaden this for you, because what happened in the Middle East didn't happen in a vacuum. And from my vantage point, as somebody who has been all around the world looking at Muslim youth, those people under the age of 30, it is very profound what happened in the Middle East. But there is a youthquake going on, and the ideas of young people are ricocheting around the world. So when you think about the impact, I mean, everybody on the stage earlier today talked about what was happening with the movement of ideas. That's the revolution. It's an ideas revolution. It's associated with youth. And when you call it a youthquake, just flesh that out a bit for us. So for me, as I look at 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet, which make up 1/4 of humanity, most of those Muslims are under the age of 30, 62%. Many of those young people have smartphones and are on Facebook. They're putting content on all the time. They're exploring their identity. They're understanding how to build networks. When I think about the power of those ideas, specifically around the issue of identity, I know for sure that something that is happening with a Muslim in Sao Paulo is making a difference to a Muslim in Jakarta. So the youthquake that's going on, the ricocheting of movement means that the outsider, as they look at this, understands that the power and the influence of all these ideas is taking shape in a wide variety of ways. That is why it is a youthquake. It's why youth matter. It's why when I'm tweeting on Twitter, I do #WhyYouthMatter. Something is going on the planet. We're seeing it in a place like the Middle East, but we can also look at countries around the world and see that this matters. What do you think that is doing, this connectedness and the instant availability of the technology to connect? What is it doing to what happens to ideas, how ideas mutate and challenge each other? So, I mean, this is a moment in time for young people. We've talked about that. But this is also a moment of time for networks. And there are all kinds of networks. There are positive networks and there are negative networks. When we think about how youth right now think about themselves, differences are broken down. Your differences don't matter. Your idea matters. So they're not looking at what religion you are or what part of the world the idea came from. They're not looking at what color your skin is. They're looking at the power of that idea. Similarly, when you think about how other nefarious groups think about networks, they're learning from positive networks. So you look at a group like Al-Shabaab, for example, that put forward its first online magazine because they're learning how to do this. You see extremist clerics who are using social media instead of using long descriptions of religious theology and how they ought to do something. They're using it in short code so that it can be used in social media and used on mobile applications. They're taking advantage. So the importance of understanding of how networks can be used makes a difference for not just you and me, certainly for everybody in this room who's coming from the private sector, from the NGO sector. How you think about the influence of your network makes a difference right now for the young people on the planet. Think about this, Paul. 80% of the world are teenagers living in the developing world. 42% of the world is under the age of 25. These networks matter. They matter in the ways we're talking about on the stage, and they matter for businesses, and they matter for security. They matter for a lot of reasons. And so let's be frank and sort of in your face about this. When young people, let's put it this way, you don't have to be an Islamic fundamentalist to see an image of American servicemen urinating on corpses to think, maybe that applies to me. Maybe I identify with the corpse and not the guy in the uniform. What do you do about that? What do you do about that practically in your everyday statecraft of your job? So I think it's really important to understand a couple of things. One, our government and other governments who have had to face very difficult circumstances on the ground, that certainly was a very serious and very tragic occurrence, have condemned the act, and that is a very important thing to do. But also, for me, from my vantage point, and for those of you who don't know my job, I am focusing on young people around the world, Muslims in Muslim majority countries and Muslims that live as minorities, and understanding what they're doing and how they're interacting and how they feel. The images that we see on TV makes a difference for my job overseas. I would ask many people in this room if they can name for me the name of a preacher in Florida a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, who threatened to burn the Quran. I bet you most people in this room couldn't mention him by name. I promise you that the young people around the world mention him by name thinking that he represents America. And the reason I bring up that example is because all of our actions on YouTube, in sound bites on the BBC, how you talk about things, how companies react to a particular thing impacts the imagery. We hear a narrative that has been out there actually since 1993, sort of this us and the them. Sam Huntington wrote a piece in '93 in Foreign Affairs called "The Clash of Civilizations." The idea being there's a West and an Islam. Newsflash: Muslims live in every part of the world. There are more Muslims that live outside of the Middle East than in it. How do we think about and give dignity to the young people who happen to be Muslim on the planet? If you're going to debunk the us and the them, you have to put into place alternative narratives than an us and a them. And the way to do that is to get young people who can speak for themselves and talk about what it means to be Muslim and modern on the planet, to talk about the difference between culture and religion. Those are the questions that young people are asking. That is how they're thinking about their identity. So when you ask about an image, a terrible image that happened in Afghanistan, or something else that might be happening in another part of the world, you are seeing an increase online, by the way, many young Muslims who are moving into the space to talk about and define who they are right now.
Are you saying to us then that, I mean, we may have missed this, that one of the revolutions we are possibly living through is the long-awaited and much sort of mourned the fact that it hasn't arrived, Muslim Reformation or Muslim Renaissance? Is there an idea of redefinition going on of what it means to be a Muslim, actually through these networks, through the horizontal spaces, that the elites just don't realize?
Well, here's what I'd like to, I wouldn't say the elites don't realize. I think the vast majority of people on the planet that are talking about what it means to be Muslim on the planet have stereotyped what a young Muslim is. And I mean that in a wide variety of ways. What I will tell you as somebody who has traveled the world and in the last 2.5 years have been to 62 countries around the world, there is only one data point that is consistent, whether I'm talking about Tashkent or I'm talking about Stockholm or I'm talking about Sao Paulo. And that is this: young Muslims are asking the question, what does it mean to be modern and Muslim? What is the difference between culture and religion? That identity piece is really key. If we do not understand that they are asking that question and that they're going to external places to get answers to that question, then we are missing the boat. We have to invest in the youth of today. We have to understand what's happening with the identity crisis. We have to understand why their voice matters. And we have to understand that this youthquake is not a negative thing, it is a powerful thing. Because as they see the diversity of each other, as they learn from each other, you heard on the stage earlier the tools that you can use and implement to build stronger societies. One of the things that has been missing is the ability for these young voices to get onto the world stage and be talked about with dignity and respect.
It just reminds me of that moment in the 1960s when, for many people in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, who were involved in dissident activity, in democratic ideas, in arts, the United States seemed at that time a very attractive pole of attraction. They wore jeans, they wore blue jeans, that was the symbol. They listened to, God forbid, American jazz. That was modern. They listened to pop music. Their painters were the abstract expressionists. Now, we're now talking, as you say, about a core of humanity. The Muslim youth coming to ask this question: what does the United States have to offer in that debate? What is the equivalent? Who is the Jackson Pollock? Who is the Václav Havel of the next generation? How do you intersect with that?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that are going on. One is our government has done a lot. Never before in history has a president of the United States put Muslim engagement front and center in how we're thinking about this demographic thing. And this is something that President Obama did on the steps of the Capitol in his inauguration speech. You certainly know that he went forward and in Cairo spread out a vision of engagement. And I think that's very important because it sent a very powerful message. But you also have the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who has recalibrated the way we at the Department of State are engaging with young people. Citizen diplomacy is key. It is central. It's very important to her. The way in which we're shaping, listening to the voices on the ground. Everything that I do is grassroots and community-driven. 2, the power of social media. 21st century statecraft is the terminology the Secretary uses to describe this. This is really powerful, that an average citizen can send a direct message to me on Facebook or Twitter, or to an ambassador, or to a senior government official is unprecedented. The power of the citizen to move those ideas forward, to let us know. I learn about and see young people all around the world. I connect an idea in Oslo with Nouakchott, Mauritania. It is important for us to understand the power of like-minded thinkers to come together. We understand that if you put smart people together that are working on things together, you're building networks that will have far more power than a government. So when you ask what can a government do, there are things that a statesman, a leader, a commander-in-chief can do. But there's so much that we can do. The greatest strength of my government, and I believe most governments in the world, as they think about the issue of youth, is to be the convener and the facilitator and the intellectual partner with the ideas that we hear on the ground. Give them the space to build. Give them the tools that they know how to affect things. Somebody earlier on the stage today talked about the nuances, that everything is not the same. How important is that fact? Something that is happening in Madrid is not the same thing that is happening in Barcelona. And we need to understand that when we talk about youth, and we talk about Muslim youth in particular, that you cannot paint people with the same brush and pretend everything is the same.
Now, you've been privileged to go to many of the places we're talking about, and in the eye of the storm. Looking ahead, where do you think this is going? Where is the network bit of it going? Where is the youth bit of it going? Where's the democracy bit of it going to end up? Is it going to end up, as we did 3 years after 1848, with dictatorships returning?
So I think it's very dangerous to be looking into a crystal ball and to pretend that you know what's going to happen. There are so many external facts that can happen. One thing I know for sure, you cannot pull back the component of information. People are thirsty and searching and want to be connected. They're sharing their ideas online. We have a moment in history. This window is open right now when we look at this. It is the investment all of us must make, government, the private sector, NGOs, and others, to understand how we give the tools to this generation so that they can move their ideas forward. I am somebody who is positive. I do believe in the ideas that are happening within these Muslim communities who are pushing back against extremist ideology that's coming in to prey upon their communities in some places. They're creating opportunities that are very organic, that make sense for their particular community, that may not make the same sense in another part of the world, but they're learning how to use the power of their facility to be able to create that, sort of fortify themselves from external ideologies. We have to give them that space to do it. We have to give them the levers to do it, and we have to help them to put more alternative narratives on the planet than a narrative of extremism, and to suggest that there is a monolith where in fact we understand that there is much diversity.
And when those people see people in your own country going onto the streets and saying, hey, even this country is due for a big change, even this country, remember the 99% bat signal projected onto the Verizon building, what do you say to them? Because the people in in Burma, people in Egypt are seeing that, and they think, I can see this. I can see I can see there's a sort of commonality, and yet you're sitting there, you're the government of that country, and it's your cops who, at the end of the day, are distributing pepper spray into the faces of some of these demonstrators.
One of the things that we talk a lot about when I go into youth situations, a community discussion, a university, to talk about the principles that are embedded in our Constitution, and that is extremely important for many ears to hear around the world, to understand that while America is not perfect, that our laws are sacred to us, and we are working very hard to make sure that we give dignity and respect to every individual. The last piece I would say on that, too, is that from the vantage point of those people who are Muslim, who are overseas, they're very interested in how Western countries treat their Muslims. They're extremely interested about the conversations that are happening here in Europe about Muslims. They're extremely interested in the way in which we give dignity to all people, regardless of race, religion, or anything else.
Farah Pandith, thank you.